Ellen, and this is my thesis presentation for class EDU 6010 Educational Research. As an overview for my thesis, this is a qualitative research study that derived from thinking about what we can do as teachers to decrease, the amount of students who are unengaged in class, disruptive behaviors, as well as those uncooperative behaviors as well that we see every day. Because of this, educators are so overwhelmed by the profession. They leave very drained. They are no longer interested in teaching, and they end up choosing other professions. Therefore, it causes us to lack retention in educators. Therefore, a strategy called whole brain teaching was introduced in 1999 by Chris Biffle. And his motto is, if a student's whole brain is involved in learning, there's no mental area left over for those challenging behaviors. And this quote got me really thinking, well, I wonder if whole brain teaching can actually, really help those teachers stay, in this profession and actually be really beneficial for our students. The purpose of my study is to gain research to better understand how educators, think and recognize the effective whole brain teaching strategies and their ability to actually utilize these techniques in the classroom. This purpose of the study is also to determine if using whole brain teaching strategies in the classroom actually positively affects the student achievement scores from their weekly test, or even those standardized test scores that we have to take, in the state. We also are trying to determine what sort of impact whole brain teaching actually has in the classroom or even over a school. The problem that started my research, or the problem at hand, was that teachers may experience students who become unengaged, emotionally and physically challenging, students that actually have learning disabilities, and disruptive and challenging behaviors. Those students with learning disabilities, the reason why I wrote that is because those students actually, are trying to learn themselves, and they may have a difficulty learning. So if teachers use whole brain teaching, they can actually also create a positive influence over those students who don't need it and those who are, or who aren't. Is there an instructional strategy to help with these challenging behaviors or any of these struggles? So that was my problem. Therefore, my research question and the goal was, is whole brain teaching an effective instructional strategy in the inclusion classroom? I chose the inclusion classroom because a lot of teachers now have students who have those 504 and IEP accommodations that they have to set forth within their goals, and most teachers have them now. We are so intertwined, so we're actually teaching both students, those regular ed students and those students who have learning disabilities. I chose this research question because of the real world need for teachers to be exposed to new instructional strategies that improve student engagement and academic achievement. A lot of teachers really don't have that growth mindset, and therefore if they just are, exposed to the new instructional strategies that there are out there, maybe we will actually have a better school environment along with student achievement scores and more engaged students. This brings me to my literature review. My 5 subtopics are: what is whole brain teaching, brain functions, the big 7, whole brain teaching with special needs, and whole brain teaching being an educational reform, not a program. What is whole brain teaching? Again, it was created by Chris Biffle in 1999. He started whole brain teaching because he wanted we wanted teachers to incorporate whole brain teaching. Students will incorporate the concept of using whole brain teaching in all parts of whole brain teaching strategies. So instead of using the left and right brain, as some teachers have known it as, they're actually using the whole brain. So if we actually learn how to activate each part of the brain, we have a more successful rate in making sure the students retain information. Whole brain teaching breaks learning down into small segments with cooperative learning. It enhances the cooperative learning structure where the students then have the opportunity to teach it to their peers. Again, this really activates all 3 learning styles: auditory, kinesthetic, and visual, and they're able to keep the students engaged. Whole brain teaching is based on 3 principles from Chris Biffle, which is making sure that it is a system that is brain-based, it's free, and it's fun. This brings us to the brain functions. If we activate each part of these brain functions, there's a purpose for each one of them. So if we activate them, we'll have a success rate with whole brain teaching. And that's where it brings us to those learning styles, the auditory, kinesthetic, and visual learning styles. Auditory learners, they hear best. They could actually have a lecture and they could actually retain the information. Whereas visual learners, they do well with pictures, illustrations, or actually just being shown something. Kinesthetic learners, however, are more hands-on learners. They like to do what they are taught. When each part of the brain is activated, then a student is actually able to work and solely learn those concepts being taught along with retaining that information. So to start off, the limbic system. The limbic system controls the student's emotions. And this is so important because it actually gives the student an emotional tie to what they're learning. They have more of an emotional investment. The cerebrum it's divided into the right and left hemisphere. And they're linked by bands of fibers that allow communication between those two hemispheres of the brain, which we will talk about in just one moment. The neocortex is the layer of the brain that actually does the thinking. So when you activate the neocortex, they're actually problem solving, they're thinking. Those lobes that we talked about here with the cerebrum, those fibers are what connect the right and left hemispheres. So those lobes are optical lobes, which processes the visual information. The temporal lobes, which processes the auditory information. And the frontal lobes, which processes those decisions, the planning, the creativity, and the problem solving, which every student really, really needs. And the prefrontal lobes, which are important, is an important area because it deals more with the emotions, like the limbic system, the personality, their working memory, their attention, and learning. As educators, it is our duty to really teach the whole brain as opposed to the left and right brain as what they have learned in the past. Because teaching to the whole brain, it requires a lot of ritual, routine, and stimulating emotions. With whole brain teaching, it's a lot of consistency, routine. You do it quite often, and it promotes more active learners. Next, we have the Big Seven. The Big Seven are the 7 elements that a teacher must use to establish whole brain teaching in the classroom. First is class yes. It is the primary attention getter. When a teacher says, "Oh, class," the teacher says, "Oh, yes." Therefore, it grabs the student's attention and it helps with that prefrontal lobe. When you activate it, it completely gets their attention and makes them invested in the learning. Teach okay is the second type of essential need in the classroom for whole brain teaching because they're taking those small segments that the teacher has taught and they're actually able to teach it to each other. For example, partner A is going to teach it to partner B, but partner B is going to listen. Those students who are more visual, that's where we're going to activate those. And when partner A teaches, it really brings out those leadership skills that they strive to use. Then when partner A is done, partner B also teaches partner A. So then there's the auditory learners as well. 5 major parts are actually activated with Teach OK. The visual cortex, the Broca's area, the Wernicke's area, and the limbic system, which is also giving the emotional tie to the concept of the lesson. So sorry. The classroom rules are the next most important part. The 5 classroom rules are follow directions quickly, raise your hand for permission to speak, raise your hand for permission to leave your seat, make smart choices, and make your dear teacher happy. Each one of these rules is actually followed by a gesture. The 5 areas of the brain that are activated are those visual cortexes, the motor cortex, the limbic system. Several different parts of the brain are activated, therefore making them really being able to mirror those good choices because it causes more orderly behavior because they are mirroring each other's good choices and not wanting to mirror the bad choices. For example, rule number 1, follow directions quickly. Rule number 2, raise your hand for permission to speak. Rule number 3, raise your hand for permission to leave your seat. Rule number 4, make smart choices. And rule number 5, keep your dear teacher happy. Therefore, when they are mirroring those, it also causes those students who are kinesthetic, they'll really be able to remember those because they put a gesture with it. The scoreboard is the next most important because it actually promotes more positive behavior in the classroom. It's a process where they're actually playing a game against the teacher, and there's a good side and there's a poor side. Obviously, a good phase, bad phase. They're given immediate feedback with the scoreboard. Of course, throughout the year, because it's a habitual thing where they're going to keep, back and forth. Oh, I made a good choice, and then they stop caring about it really. You have to make it more and more challenging. For example, in the beginning of the year, we're going to work for 5 extra minutes of recess. Every time you make a good choice as a class, because it's not based on individual students, as a class, you'll get a good tally mark where they'll say, oh yeah. And as a class, if they're just talking too loud after you've told them not to, give me an oh no. So the more good tallies you get, the better the reward. The more poor choices, then you don't get the extra reward. The farther you are throughout the school year, you obviously want to cut it back. So instead of doing 10 tallies, you want to do 5 tallies. And this also causes them to feel more of a positive and a negative emotion to actually their choices. That way they'll be able to go with their limbic system, which it activates that one as well. Hands and eyes. The purpose is for your students to focus intensely on what you're saying. Therefore, when you say hands and eyes, instead of saying class yes, just to get their attention, you say hands and eyes, you stop, and they are not to do anything. They need to listen solely on what you're saying. And it focuses all their visual and auditory parts of their brain on what the teacher is saying. Switch, again, it activates the charges the listener to the speaker or the teacher, those students who like to be student teachers, and it promotes cooperative learning. So when you say teach okay, and the students are teaching each other, they're cooperating. They're learning how to work together to learn what they're doing. So when you say switch, partner A now switches to partner B, and they teach each other. Mirrors is something that it's primarily used for the teacher. The teacher teaches a concept or a small segment using gestures. For example, if I were to be teaching about contractions, well, contractions are a smaller way of saying what you need to say. Don't forget, the apostrophe is key. That way, you've activated all of those auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learners because they listen to it, they can see it, and they can do it. And that way, they'll always remember what a contraction is. And of course, whenever they're reading it or when they're actually writing contractions, they'll definitely remember that. When they use mirrors, they're repeating, of course, what the teacher is saying in their gestures and words, along with it causes those students to memorize concepts that go along with the hand motions. Whole brain teaching and special needs. The students with special needs are actually using the different parts of their brain that they have poor function over. And so when they're actually using those parts of the brain that they may not be normally used to activating, it makes a positive influence on their learning environment. Some of the whole brain teaching strategies, they may fulfill accommodations set forth within the 504 and the IEP. Some of these are repeating instructions, multiple options for movement, providing auditory directions, developing visual or conceptualization skills, and developing visual mnemonics, providing simultaneous visual, auditory, and kinesthetic experiences, of course with those mirrors, and involving children in movement several times a day. With whole brain teaching, they are moving all the time. An educational reform, not a program. A lot of those senior teachers, those teachers that have been in the classroom for a really long time, they are set in their ways. They don't want to change their educational, their instructional practice. But then you may see students that are more, unengaged, or students who are, disruptive or have challenging behaviors, because students that were way then are, they're not the learners that they are now. We have so much more research to help us. Why not have a growth mindset and try to do a new approach? Some educators may think that whole brain teaching is a new idea or an unnecessary approach. On the contrary, some other teachers may think that whole brain teaching is a true teaching practice combined into a new approach. We say it's a best practice because according to research, a best practice is research driven. It is a method that demonstrates success and can be replicated. Of course, it is research driven. Lots of research has been put into whole brain teaching to be put into place. It demonstrates success, and it can be replicated. Many teachers can use it. And you can use it across all grade levels and subject areas, and it combines direct instruction along with sharing that immediate feedback. This goes along with my theory. The Learning Theory by Eric Jensen, he really truly supported that brain-based education is the purposeful engagement of strategies that apply to how our brain works in the context of education. You must engage your learners and do it with strategies based on real science. And when I say real science, I mean when a lot of educators or even parents, they believe that the physical movement, such as physical education, PE, recess, it is so vital because they're moving those brains. Well, why can't we incorporate movement into our classroom as well to make those students be able to be more engaged and learn better? Whole brain teaching can create a positive influence on, if used, the theory would be that student engagement would increase. Teachers would be a lot more positive because they're seeing a positive influence in their classroom and a positive change. And of course, discipline would also change as well. This goes to the methodology. The method will be a qualitative study, like I stated. The setting is at a Title I school. We're calling it School A. Title I school that School A is at is poverty-stricken, and it has a large quantity of referrals based on the 2015-2016 school year. This survey will be given at faculty meetings. In order for us to determine how many subjects will be, participating in the research study, we're going to be giving a survey out to those teachers to be able to see who would like to be participating. Participation is completely voluntary for this study. They will be given 1 week to complete the survey, and this survey will consist of multiple choice questions and extended response. Those multiple choice questions will be, yes, no, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and some of those feedback questions that we'll be asking are, how do you feel about discipline in your classroom? How do you feel about the engagement in your classroom? Do you think that there should be a change in the school? What do you think? All participants will be given an Excel spreadsheet as well to record data from weekly assessments and the training. In order to, select those samples, the samples were selected by the results of the email that the survey was given. We are not going to mail out the survey, it will be emailed. The survey is not anonymous. The teachers will have to provide their name and their grade level only for the purpose so that the researcher will be able to know who wants to use these whole brain strategies in the classroom. The samples of the studies are teachers that actually teach at School A in any of the subject areas. And of course, 100% participation is wanted. However, if I do not have 100% participation, then we are looking for at least 2 teachers per grade level, which would be 10 to 12 subjects for the purpose of this qualitative study. For the time frame, throughout this whole study, they will be given 1 week to complete the study. There will be a 1-day meeting for them to learn all the strategies used in whole brain teaching. And they will be given 4 months to actually do the study, complete the study, implement these strategies in the classroom. At the end of the 4 months, they will need to turn in the data spreadsheet based on the weekly assessment scores and respond to the post-survey. Now the post-survey will be anonymous. We will just only need the grade level just so that we can use that for data analysis and collection. Based on data collection, the survey that is emailed out to determine the number of subjects, that will be used for data collection. Data from the weekly test scores from the Excel spreadsheet to see if there's an achievement increase or decrease. And the purpose of sending out the same survey for the post and pre-survey is just to see the change in answers and to see more trends to see if teachers change their mind. The data analysis, the survey, the researcher will look at how many people answered the questions, and they will be graphed and charted to show how many chose the actual answer. For example, for question number 1, do teachers feel like there needs to be a change in the school based on, student engagement? Strongly agree, disagree, such and so forth. It made me graph that question number 1. 80% of the participants chose that they strongly agree that there needed to be a change. The post-survey will also be analyzed, but it will be more on, again, the same questions. Did we see a trend? Did teachers end up changing their mind, realizing, hey, whole brain teaching is actually great? Or The data collection from the students' weekly test scores will also be graphed to show whether or not they improved or decreased in scores. We want to actually see, yes, does it show increase in engagement or cooperative behaviors, but we also want to see if it actually will do well with retaining information and produce better achievement scores. The researcher will graph those achievement scores by grade level just to see that trend. You know, is whole brain teaching effective for all grade levels? At this school, did they see an increase for 5th grade, or maybe in 2nd grade they didn't? For interpreting the data will be in graphs and tables to show trends. Each question from the pre and post survey will be graphed to show the average answer to the questions. For the pre-survey, the questions are to determine the knowledge and understanding of the whole brain classroom, and the purpose of the post-survey is to determine the knowledge and understanding of the whole brain teaching after implementing it in the classroom. And of course, the data collected will be introduced to the public, such as the principal, the district personnel over the school, or anyone else that may be parents. And participants in the presentation will also be seeing the graphs and the trends, along with it will be shown in a presentation at the faculty meeting. These are my references, some of the main ones that I really felt were very imperative for this research study. I recommend that this book by Chris Biffle, written in 2013. It's called Whole Brain Teaching for Challenging Kids and the Rest of Your Class Too. It is so important for those teachers who really want to incorporate whole brain teaching in their classrooms. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.